Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. Today we are going to learn how to graph a quadratic function in standard form. The standard form of a quadratic function is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. In order to graph this, our first step is going to be to identify our values of a, b, and c. Looking at our example, y equals 3x squared minus 6x plus 1, we can identify a by looking at the coefficient in front of our squared term. So our value of a is 3. B is the coefficient in front of our linear term, or our term that with just x in it, and in this case our b is negative 6. Remember to pay attention to the signs in front of the numbers when you're identifying a, b, and c. And c is our constant term, which in this case is 1. Once we've identified a, b, and c, we can now use a and b to find our axis of symmetry. Our axis of symmetry is the line x equals negative b over 2a. So for our example, it would be x equals negative 6 over 2 times 3. Negative 1 times negative 6 gives us positive 6 over 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 over 6 is 1. So our axis of symmetry is the line x equals 1. Remember, a line in the form x equals a constant is a vertical line. So I'm going to go to my x-axis, find 1, and draw a vertical line going straight up and down. Please take a moment to pause this video and record this example thus far in your notes. The next step in graphing our quadratic function is to make a table of values. When I make my table of values, I'm going to choose values of x to plug in to find my y value. I always put my axis of symmetry in the center of my table for my x values. So I got 1 for my axis of symmetry, and then I'm going to pick 2 values that fall to the left and right of 1 on the x-axis. So I'm going to pick 2 and 3, and also 0 and negative 1. Now I'm going to plug them into my equation, plug the values of x into the equation so that I can find y. So I'm going to start off with plugging in negative 1. So I get y equals 3 times negative 1 squared minus 6 times negative 1 plus 1. Using my order of operations, I'm going to do my exponent first and do negative 1 squared, which is just 1. So now I have 3 times 1 minus 6 times negative 1 plus 1. My next step would be to multiply. 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 6 times negative 1 is positive 6 plus 1. 3 plus 6 plus 1 gives me 10. So when I plug in negative 1 for x, I get a y value of 10. Now I'm going to plug in 0. When I plug in 0, both of my terms that have an x in it are going to become 0 themselves. So I'm going to end up with 0 minus 0 plus 1. So that is going to give me 1. If you remember at the beginning, our value of c is 1. C is important because c is our y-intercept, and the point 0, 1 is a y-intercept. Now I'm going to plug in 1 for x and solve. So I'd have y equals 3 times 1 squared minus 6 times 1 plus 1. Using my order of operations and solving for the exponent first, 1 squared is 1. So I have 3 times 1 minus 6 times 1 plus 1. My next step in the order of operations would be to multiply. 3 times 1 is 3, and 6 times 1 is 6. So I have 3 minus 6 plus 1. 3 minus 6 is negative 3, plus 1 is negative 2. So I have the point 1, negative 2. Now remember, when we set up our table, we put our axis of symmetry directly in the center of our table. Well, remember, if something is symmetrical, it means it's the same on both sides. So I don't have to plug in the values of 2 and 3 to find the y values. It's going to be exactly the same as on the other side. So I'm going to have 1 and 10. The nice thing about graphing a quadratic function in standard form is we only have to fill out 3 values in our table, and then using symmetry, we can find out our other 2 values. My fourth and final step is just going to be to plot the points and connect them to create a parabola, or a U-shaped graph. Now that my points are plotted, I connect them, and I have graphed my equation in standard form. Please take a moment to pause this video, finish recording this example in your notes, as well as any questions you may have for me when we have our next Zoom meeting. Take care, be well, stay safe. See you soon.